Part 1. The First Night at Black Creek Campsite. The sun was sinking behind the tall pines when we reached Black Creek Campsite, and the whole forest looked as if someone had painted it with fading gold light that slowly turned into cold gray shadows, and the road behind us disappeared like it had never existed at all. And the four of us stood there wondering if we had made a big mistake coming this deep into the woods for a simple weekend trip. There was Michael, who always acted brave even when he was secretly scared. And there was Erin, who kept joking to hide her nerves. And then there was Jacob, who loved filming everything with his old camera, as if danger would avoid anyone holding a lens. And finally there was me, trying to pretend I was not hearing strange sounds coming from between the trees, like someone calling out from far away. We set up our tents near the creek because the sound of running water felt comforting at first, and the air smelled like wet soil and pine, and the forest seemed calm, but there was something about the way the branches moved without any wind that made my skin crawl. Jacob wandered off a little to look for good angles to film, and we kept telling him not to go too far because the forest was huge and there were no other campers around for miles, and the place had a kind of lonely silence that did not feel natural at all. When he came back, he looked pale, and he kept staring at the tree line like he expected something to step out any second. And we asked him what happened, but he just shook his head and said, "Nothing, it is fine," but his voice did not sound fine at all. We lit a fire just before the sky went dark, and the flames threw long, shaky shadows across the ground that looked like tall figures rising from the forest floor, and Erin whispered that it looked as if something was standing behind us, but when we turned around, there was nothing except endless rows of trees. That silence returned again, but this time it felt different, heavier, like it was waiting. We tried to talk, laugh, and pretend everything was normal, but the forest kept swallowing every sound we made, like it didn't want anything loud here, as if noise might wake something sleeping in the dark. Then we heard it, a slow, dragging sound coming from behind the creek. Not footsteps, not an animal, but something pulling itself across the ground as if its legs did not work properly. We froze. The fire crackled. Michael tightened his grip on a stick as if that would save us. The dragging sound stopped for a moment, and then another noise echoed through the trees, a soft voice calling out, "Help me! Please, help me!" And the words sounded wrong, because they had no emotion, almost like someone was repeating a phrase they had heard before but did not understand. Jacob pointed his camera toward the sound and whispered that he had heard the same voice earlier when he was alone, but he thought it was just his imagination. The voice called again, "Help me! Please, help me!" And this time it came from much closer, almost from the edge of the firelight, and Erin grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. We saw movement between the trees, something tall and thin shifting slowly behind the bushes like it was learning how to walk or how to follow our voices. Jacob shouted, "Who is there?" And the forest swallowed his words again, leaving only silence and the growing crackle of the fire. Then branches snapped, heavy, slow, deliberate. The thing stepped a little closer, and the faint firelight touched its outline just enough to show that it was not shaped like a person, not fully. Its arms were too long, and its head tilted unnaturally, like it was studying us. We backed up toward our tents, but the creature did not move any faster. It just watched us, as if deciding who to go after first. Then Jacob's camera light flickered on by itself and shined directly at the creature, and for a split second we saw its skin was torn like old wet paper, and its eyes did not reflect the firelight at all. They were just empty, dark holes. The light went out. The forest went silent, and the creature whispered the same words again. "Help me, please, help me," like a broken recording stuck on repeat. We grabbed our bags and ran into the tent, not knowing what else to do, and for the rest of the night we could hear it moving around our campsite, dragging itself slowly, circling us, breathing softly like it was just outside, waiting for us to step out. That was the first encounter, and it was only the beginning.
Part 2. The Thing That Walked Around the Tent. The night felt endless as we sat inside the tent, shaking every time the creature outside dragged itself over the dry leaves, and each movement sounded closer than before, like it already knew exactly where we were hiding, and it was only waiting for the right moment to reach inside and pull one of us out. The tent fabric felt thin like paper, and every shadow outside looked sharper and darker because our single lantern cast long shapes against the walls, and those shapes kept shifting even when none of us moved. And that was when Erin whispered that she could hear breathing right behind her. Slow, rough breaths like someone struggling to inhale through a torn throat. We held our breath and listened, and the breathing got louder. And then we heard a faint scraping against the tent, like long fingers dragging across the fabric. Michael crawled to the tent zipper and whispered that we had to run, but Jacob grabbed him by the arm and shook his head because he swore he saw the creature crouching next to the tent when the camera light flickered earlier, and if we unzipped the door, it might jump straight inside. The scraping stopped. Then the breathing stopped. Then everything was silent. But the silence did not feel safe. It felt like something was leaning in, listening to us, and trying to understand if we had moved. None of us dared to speak. Minutes passed like hours, and the forest outside grew colder until we could see our breath even inside the tent. And Jacob said the camera battery died, but he could swear he still heard a faint clicking sound, like the camera was trying to turn itself on. The clicking grew louder until it was right behind him, and he flinched so hard he almost tore the tent. But when he turned around, there was no camera anywhere near him, and the clicking sound suddenly shifted to the other side of the tent, as if something outside was mimicking it. We pressed close together. The lantern flickered. The moment it dimmed, we all heard the same voice again whispering, "Help me, please help me." But it sounded different this time, quieter, slower, almost like the creature was standing right above us, whispering through the tent fabric without even needing to breathe. The lantern went out. Total darkness. We sat frozen because none of us wanted to touch the tent or make any noise, and for a moment we thought maybe the creature was gone, but then we heard faint footsteps circling us, and that was the first time we realized it was no longer dragging itself. It was walking. Slow, careful steps, crunching the dead leaves like it had learned how to move like a person. Erin covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Michael held a pocket knife, even though we knew it would not help. Then the footsteps stopped directly in front of the tent door, and something pressed down on the zipper from outside, testing it, sliding one long finger from top to bottom, as if memorizing how to open it. Jacob whispered a shaky prayer. I held my breath until my chest burned. The zipper moved, just a little, half an inch. We all jumped back, but the creature did not open it. It just let the zipper fall back into place, like it was teasing us, letting us know how easily it could get inside whenever it wanted. The steps backed away slowly.
Then we heard it moving toward the trees again, dragging its legs like before, as if walking had been too much, or maybe it only pretended to walk to scare us. The dragging sound faded into the forest. The voice faded with it. And finally the first faint glow of dawn touched the sky. We did not sleep. We just waited, shaking until there was enough daylight to see outside. When we finally stepped out, the campsite was a mess. Branches torn, footprints everywhere. Footprints that were too long, too deep, and too uneven. And right next to the tent door, the creature had drawn a single handprint in the dirt. A long, thin hand, with fingers that curved like claws. We knew then we had to leave. But the forest had other plans, because our car was no longer where we left it. It was gone, completely gone, as if something dragged it deep into the woods during the night.
Part 3. The car that vanished into the trees. Morning light should have made us feel safe, but instead it only revealed how trapped we were, because the space where our car had been parked the night before was nothing but torn soil, deep grooves, and broken branches, as if something massive had dragged the entire vehicle away without leaving any metal pieces or tire marks behind. And Jacob kept repeating that no animal could do this, while Erin kept shaking her head, saying this place was wrong, deeply wrong. Michael walked ahead, following the drag marks that cut through the trees, and we followed, even though every step felt like a mistake, because the deeper we went, the quieter the forest grew, until there were no birds, no wind, no running creek, just a suffocating silence that felt heavy on our skin. After a few minutes, we found a patch of torn bark where the trunk of a large tree had been scraped clean, and the marks were long and thin like the same fingers that touched our tent. And the idea that the creature had strength enough to drag our car through the woods made my stomach twist. We continued walking until we reached a narrow opening between the trees where the dragged marks suddenly stopped, like the car had been lifted straight off the ground and carried deeper into the forest. Erin whispered that we should go back to the campsite, but the moment she said it, we heard a sound coming from above us, not from the ground. A low creaking, a shifting weight, branches bending under something heavy. We looked up slowly, and the blood in my body turned to ice. Our car was stuck high in the branches of 2 huge pine trees, smashed sideways, with the front tires dangling 20 feet above the forest floor, and the metal frame twisted like someone had crushed it with their bare hands. The windshield was shattered inward, as if something had forced its way in, and the doors hung open, but no creature, no person, nothing was visible inside. Jacob filmed it with trembling hands and said, "This cannot be real. This cannot be real." But the forest swallowed his voice again, and we all felt that same heavy silence return. Then we heard a new sound. Not dragging, not footsteps, but something knocking on the car door from inside. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Then 3 more knocks. Each one louder, each one deeper. We backed away without realizing it, and Erin grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin, and she whispered that whatever was in the car was not human. Before we could move, the forest shifted around us like a cold breath rolling through the trees, and the knocking stopped, suddenly replaced by a soft whisper floating down from the branches. "Help me. Please help me." The same broken voice from last night, coming from inside our car. Jacob pointed the camera upward again, but the moment he did, something moved in the shattered windshield, a long, thin shadow pulling itself back deeper into the ruined interior, trying to hide from the daylight. Michael whispered, "We are leaving now, right now,"
and we nodded without arguing because every instinct inside us screamed that we had to get away from that tree before the creature climbed down. We ran. Branches slapped against our legs and arms. The forest floor cracked beneath our feet. The silence shattered as we sprinted back toward the campsite. But halfway there, the air grew colder again, and the trees around us seemed to close in tighter, narrowing the path and forcing us to move slower. Then we reached the creek and stopped instantly, because something new was waiting for us. The creature was not there, but 4 sets of footprints were. Not human footprints. Long, deep, clawed, and each set of prints led directly to where we had slept last night. 4 prints, one for each of us, as if the creature had studied us, measured us, chosen us. And next to the footprints in the wet soil was a message traced with a claw. One word: stay. Before we could decide what to do, Jacob screamed and pointed upstream, and when we looked, we saw something floating in the shallow water. A backpack. Michael's backpack. Ripped open, and behind it, just barely visible under the water, a hand. Pale. Thin. Still. Reaching upward for the surface.
Part 4. The Hand Beneath the Water. For a long moment, none of us moved because the pale hand in the water looked so still that it felt unreal, like something placed there on purpose to scare us away or maybe to pull us closer. And the creek that had sounded peaceful on our first night now felt like a trap waiting to swallow anything that stepped too near its edge. Michael stepped forward, calling out, "Hello! Who is there?" And his voice cracked because he already knew the truth. He knew it was not a living person reaching for help, but something else, something that wanted us to come close enough for it to grab us and drag us under. Jacob held up his camera, but his hands shook so badly the footage was nothing but blurry shapes and running water, and he kept whispering, "I do not want to get closer. I do not want to get closer." And none of us could blame him. Aaron crouched slowly, keeping a distance, and reached toward a fallen branch, using it to nudge the hand, and when the branch touched the pale skin, the fingers curled tightly around the wood, as if whatever was under the water had been waiting for that tiny bit of contact. We all jumped back. The hand tightened its grip and then yanked the branch downward with a strength that did not match how frail it looked, and we watched the branch disappear beneath the surface like it had been pulled into a hole. The water settled. The hand vanished. No bubbles, no ripples, nothing. It was like the hand had never been there at all. But the cold feeling in the air spread through the forest again, and we knew it had been real. Very real. Aaron started crying quietly, saying, "We need to get out of here. We need to find help." And Michael agreed. But when we tried to follow the trail that led out of the campsite, we discovered that the forest had changed during the night because the path was no longer a clear trail, but now a twisted maze of fallen branches, dense undergrowth, and broken tree limbs that looked like they had been ripped down intentionally. We kept walking anyway, pushing through brush and thorns, cutting through vines that wrapped around our legs like hands trying to hold us back. And after only a few minutes, we realized we were going in circles because the same crooked tree with the hollow trunk kept appearing again and again on our left. Jacob said, "The forest is moving around us," and none of us answered because deep down we felt the same thing. This place did not want us to leave. And something was guiding us back to the creek and the campsite, like invisible hands turning us around. Eventually, we reached a dried clearing where the ground was cracked from lack of water, and the scent of something dead drifted through the air, and Michael covered his mouth as the smell grew stronger. In the center of the clearing lay a deer, or at least what used to be a deer. but its body was stretched unnaturally, like something had pulled it until the bones snapped, and its head was twisted completely backward, and carved into its side were deep claw marks that formed symbols none of us recognized. Sharp, uneven marks, like a warning or maybe a message meant only for whoever dared walk this far. Aaron whispered, "We need to turn back. We cannot go this way." But before we could move, the air shifted again, and the forest around us went completely silent. Even the insects stopped, and that heavy pressure returned, pushing down on our chests. Then, from behind a fallen log, we heard a voice. "Help me! Please help me!" But this time it was not the creature's voice. It was a perfect copy of Jacob's. The same tone, the same breath, the same fear. We all turned to look at him, but Jacob was standing right beside us, his face pale, shaking his head, saying, "That is not me! That is not me!" The voice called again louder, "Help me! Please help me!" And it sounded exactly like Jacob shouting through a cracked throat, and the sound came from somewhere deeper inside the forest. Michael grabbed Jacob by the shoulders and forced him to look straight at him, saying, "Do not follow it. Whatever happens, do not follow it." But Jacob's eyes were wide with horror, because hearing your own voice calling out for help from a place you had never been was more terrifying than anything we had heard before. Then the ground beneath our feet trembled slightly, like something large was moving below the surface, and small cracks spread through the dry soil around the twisted deer body. We backed away slowly. The earth cracked again, then split, and from inside the dark opening, something long and thin began to rise. Not the full creature, not yet, just an arm. The same pale arm we saw in the water, except this one was longer, stretching impossibly upward, clawing at the air, inching out of the ground like the creature was pulling itself toward us. The fingers curled toward Erin as if it recognized her. We ran. Branches whipped our faces, roots caught our ankles. The forest seemed to tilt as we kept running blindly, trying to get as far as possible from that clearing. When we finally reached our campsite again, exhausted, shaking, and barely breathing, we realized something that chilled us deeper than anything else. Our tents were gone. Not ripped, not destroyed, just gone. Only 4 deep claw marks were carved into the dirt, and above them, a new word was written. Follow. Part 5. The Forest That Wanted Us Deeper. The word carved into the dirt felt like a command, and none of us wanted to obey it, but the forest around us seemed to tighten like walls closing in, and every path we tried to take twisted back toward the same direction, the deep center of the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows grew heavier, as if something ancient waited there for us to arrive. Erin kept shaking her head, saying, "We cannot go deeper, we cannot follow it." But when we tried turning back, the ground behind us felt wrong. Our footprints disappeared instantly, swallowed by the soil, as if the forest erased them to keep us from knowing which way we had come. Jacob held his camera against his chest, whispering over and over, "Why us? Why this place?" And no one had an answer, not even Michael, who always pretended to know what to do, but now looked lost and terrified. We walked slowly because the air felt colder the deeper we went, and the trees around us no longer looked natural. Their bark was peeling in long strips, and their branches bent downward, almost touching the ground like arms reaching for us, and the smell of wet decay grew stronger with every step. After a while, we reached a narrow path lined with tall pines that leaned inward, forming a tunnel of shadows, and the sunlight above barely touched the ground, and the silence was so perfect it felt like sound itself had died. Jacob whispered that he heard something behind us, and when we turned, we saw nothing except empty forest, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier until it pressed into our backs like invisible eyes following every breath we took. Halfway down the path, we noticed something hanging from the low branches. Cloth, shredded, faded, dirty. When we got closer, we realized it was clothing. Children's clothing. Small shirts and torn jackets dangling like limp bodies, swaying gently, even though there was no breeze. Erin covered her mouth. Michael whispered, "We need to move faster." But as we passed the hanging clothes, we heard soft footsteps behind us. Not heavy, not dragging. Small, light, running. We froze. The footsteps stopped. Then a child's voice whispered from the darkness ahead, "Come play." The tone was wrong, too flat, too empty, like someone trying to imitate how a human child speaks. Then from deeper inside the dark tunnel we saw movement. Something small, a child-sized shape stepping forward slowly. But the shape was wrong, arms too long, head bent sideways, skin gray like wet clay. The figure stood there swaying slightly. Then it lifted its face. Its eyes were dark holes, exactly like the creature from the night before. It whispered again, "Come play," and the sound rattled through the trees as if dozens of unseen voices were whispering the same words along with it. We stumbled backward, but the moment we turned around, another small figure stepped onto the path behind us, blocking our escape, its body twitching unnaturally like someone was pulling invisible strings. Then more shapes appeared, one by one, between the trees, dozens of thin, gray, childlike figures stepping out of the forest with empty eyes and stretched limbs, slowly forming a circle around us. Jacob grabbed my arm and pointed to the ground, and when we looked down, we realized the soil beneath our feet was covered in handprints, small, pale handprints pressed deep into the dirt as if something had crawled all over this place. Michael shouted, "Run this way," and shoved aside one of the smaller figures, and we sprinted down the path, the circle breaking for a moment as the forest exploded into a chorus of whispers, the voices urging us to come back, come play, stay with us forever. The figures chased us, fast, too fast, their footsteps slapping against the ground in uneven rhythms. We ran until the tunnel of trees opened into a wide clearing, and for a moment we thought we were safe, but the clearing was wrong. The ground was covered in bones, hundreds, maybe thousands, not fresh, but not old either. A field of pale remains scattered like leaves, and when we stepped on them, they cracked softly under our shoes. In the center of the clearing stood something taller than any tree, a twisted structure made of branches and bones, woven together like a giant altar reaching toward the sky. And carved into the base of the structure, with deep claw marks, was a sentence that made our blood run cold. "We see you. We choose you. We follow you." Behind us, the sound of footsteps returned. All of them, running. The childlike figures had not stopped, and now something much larger moved behind them. Part 6. The Thing Behind the Children. The bones in the clearing cracked under our feet as we backed toward the towering structure, and the sound echoed through the empty forest like brittle warnings breaking one after another, and the childlike figures stopped at the edge of the clearing, their bodies twitching, their heads tilting, as if waiting for permission to come closer. But they were not what terrified us most, because something much larger moved in the shadows behind them. A heavy, shifting sound, branches snapping, soil sinking under enormous weight. The childlike thing stood perfectly still, their empty eyes fixed on us, while the shape behind them rose higher and higher until it blocked out the thin sunlight that struggled through the trees. Michael whispered, "Do not move," and for once none of us argued because our bodies felt frozen by pure instinct. Then the silence broke, a deep, slow breath, not human, not animal, something ancient, something starving. The child figures stepped aside, making a path, a narrow opening between their thin bodies, and from the darkness behind them, something crawled forward. We saw its arms first, long, pale limbs, bending wrong at every joint, pulling its massive body inch by inch across the bone-covered ground, and its fingers were twice as long as the child creature's, long enough to drag grooves in the dirt wherever they touched. Its head rose slowly, too slowly, like lifting it caused pain, and when it turned toward us, we saw its face. No eyes, just two hollow pits sinking deep into its skull, a mouth torn open wider than a human jaw could stretch, lined with jagged, uneven teeth like broken stones forced into flesh. The moment it faced us, the childlike creatures began whispering in unison, their voices layered and shaking as they repeated one phrase over and over. "Stay with us. Stay with us. Stay with us." The creature crawled closer. Bones cracked beneath it like dry paper. Aaron grabbed my hand so tight it hurt, and Jacob raised his camera even though it had been dead for hours, and he whispered, "Please work, please work, please." And then the camera light flickered to life, a tiny beam, weak, but enough to hit the creature's face. The reaction was immediate. The creature recoiled with a violent jerk, and a shriek tore through the clearing, a sound so sharp it felt like it ripped the inside of our skulls, and the childlike figures clutched their heads, screeching along with it. Michael shouted, "Run!" and we sprinted across the bone field, slipping, stumbling, our lungs burning as the creature thrashed behind us, dragging its massive body forward faster than before. The trees ahead opened into another narrow path, but the deeper we ran, the darker it became, until the forest swallowed almost all light, and we could barely see the ground beneath our feet. The whispers returned, not behind us, not around us, inside the trees themselves, like the forest was speaking to us. "We see you. We follow you. You belong here." The path split into two, and Michael chose the left without hesitating, pulling us with him. But as soon as we entered the new trail, the air changed completely. Warm, too warm, like stepping into a room filled with breath. The trees here were closer together, the branches overhead woven so tightly they blocked the sky, and the ground was soft, like thick moss soaking moisture through our shoes. Jacob whispered, "Stop, listen." And when we did, we heard it. Water, not a creek, not a stream, a slow dripping sound, like something wet hanging from above, something heavy, something breathing. We looked up and saw dozens of shapes suspended from the branches, bodies, human bodies wrapped in layers of tangled roots and tree fibers like cocoons, and their faces were pale, pressed against the outer layer, their mouths open as if frozen mid-scream. Erin covered her mouth, but the moment she did, the entire forest shuddered, like something massive had moved through the soil beneath us. Then one of the bodies that had fallen crawled toward us, but instead of attacking, it lifted a trembling hand and pointed deeper into the forest, to a narrow break in the trees, almost hidden, a path, a way out. We did not know if it was a warning or a trap, but the creature was closing in, and the bodies around us were rising like newborn predators, and we had no choice. We ran toward the hidden path, but as we reached it, we heard a final whisper behind us, not from the bodies, not from the creature, from the forest itself. It whispered, "The fourth encounter begins now." Part 7. The fourth encounter begins. The hidden path was so narrow we had to turn our bodies sideways to squeeze through the branches and the trees. felt alive, brushing against our shoulders, like they were trying to pull us back toward the clearing, where the creature roared again, shaking the ground beneath our feet, and the hanging bodies screeched in response, as if answering their master. We pushed deeper into the corridor of twisting bark and roots, and the air grew colder again. So cold our breath came in pale clouds, and every step echoed softly, like the forest floor had turned into hollow wood, as if something empty stretched beneath us. Aaron whispered, "I can hear something ahead," and we all stopped, listening carefully. At first it was faint, a soft tapping, then 2 taps, then 3, steady, rhythmic, like someone knocking on a door buried underground. As we moved closer, the tapping grew louder, and we began to see shapes forming in the darkness of the path ahead. Tall wooden posts stood on each side of the trail, carved with symbols similar to the ones on the twisted deer, and each post had deep claw marks running down its length, as if something had tried to escape from them. Jacob said, "This is a warning, we should turn back." But turning back meant facing the creature and the rising bodies behind us, so we kept walking until the path opened into a circular hollow, surrounded by trees growing so tightly together their trunks merged into one massive wall. And at the center of the hollow stood a small wooden cabin, old, rotten, barely standing, its windows dark like eyes staring at us, and the tapping sound came from inside. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, again and again. We approached slowly, and the air around the cabin felt thick, like moving through invisible water, and a strange smell drifted out of the cracks in the wood, a mix of wet soil and old breath. Michael whispered, "Someone might be alive in there, maybe trapped, maybe hurt," and he took a hesitant step toward the door, but before he could touch it, the door creaked open on its own, the hinges groaning like the cabin itself was waking up. Inside, everything was dark, too dark. The tapping stopped. Silence. Massive. Suffocating. We waited. Then a soft voice drifted from the darkness inside. "Come in. We need you." We froze, because the voice was familiar. It sounded exactly like Erin, perfectly identical. Erin stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that is not me. I did not say that." The voice came again. "Come in. We need you." This time it sounded like me, and the sound made my stomach twist into knots because it spoke with my exact breath, my exact tone. Michael whispered, "It is copying us. It is using our voices." Jacob raised his camera again, desperate for any light, and the moment the tiny beam illuminated the cabin interior, we saw something move at the far corner. A shape hunched over. Tall, thin, arms too long. Its head turned slowly toward us, and we saw the face. A blank surface of pale stretched skin, like a mask with no features at all. Then the skin rippled, shifted, pulled outward, and a mouth formed where no mouth should be. Wide, crooked, filled with long teeth. The creature inside took one step forward, and the room behind it unfolded into shapes like bodies that had melted into the walls, their faces trapped inside the wooden planks, their mouths opening and closing slowly, as if begging for release. We stumbled backward, but the forest behind us shifted again, the trees bending inward, trapping us between the cabin and the living wall of wood. The creature stepped out of the doorway, dragging its long limbs across the ground, and each step made the earth tremble lightly. Then it opened its mouth wider and spoke again, this time sounding like all of us at once. "You came. We have been waiting." Michael grabbed our arms and pulled hard. "Run now!" And we ran past the cabin, ducking under its porch and forcing our way into another narrow break in the trees that led deeper into a part of the forest none of us had seen before. The ground became wet and muddy, sucking at our shoes like hands pulling downward with every step, and the trees grew taller, leaning so far overhead it felt like they were closing into a single tunnel. Behind us, the creature from the cabin screamed, and the cry echoed through the forest, waking everything else, and the childlike figures began whispering again somewhere far behind us. "Stay, stay, stay." We pushed forward, desperate, until the tunnel of trees finally opened into a wide swamp filled with shallow water that reflected the gray sky above. But the water was not still. It moved, rippling in circles. Dozens of circles, as if something was swimming just beneath the surface. Jacob whispered, "We cannot cross this. We need another way." But every path behind us was already closing as roots rose from the ground, twisting together like living ropes. Then, from the center of the swamp, a large shape rose slowly from the water, a human shape, or something pretending to be human. Gray skin, hollow eyes, and a smile that stretched too wide. It whispered, "Welcome," in Michael's voice. We realized then, the fourth encounter had already begun, and we were standing in its home.
The forest had gone silent again, and that silence felt heavier than any scream we had heard so far. It felt like the woods were listening to us, waiting for the next mistake we would make. The flashlight shook in my hand, but I kept walking, following the faint, muddy trail left by something or someone that clearly was not human. My boots sank into the wet soil with every step, and each footprint beside mine looked larger, deeper, and older, as if dozens of similar creatures had walked these same woods for years, maybe longer. Ethan stayed close behind, breathing fast, but trying his best not to fall apart. He kept whispering that we should turn back, but at this point, turning back felt more dangerous than moving forward, because whatever lived in those woods had been pushing us step by step deeper into their territory. And somehow we knew that stopping now meant letting them catch up. The trees grew taller and darker, their branches twisting together until the sky disappeared completely. We reached a narrow passage between two dead pine trunks, and the moment we crossed through it, the air changed. It smelled like metal and smoke, and it felt warm, like something had been standing there just a moment ago, watching us. It was the first time I realized we were not just being followed, we were being guided. At the end of the passage, we found something none of us could explain, a clearing with no moonlight, no stars, only a soft red glow rising from the ground itself. In the center of the clearing stood 4 tents arranged in a perfect circle, and each one looked exactly like our own. Same color, same size, same torn seams, same mud stains. It was like someone had copied every detail and placed them here, waiting for us. Ethan whispered, asking if we should check them. I wished I had said no. I wished I had grabbed him and run, but I nodded and stepped toward the first tent. My throat felt tight, my hands cold as ice. I reached for the zipper and slowly pulled it up. The inside was pitch black, darker than night even, though my flashlight was shining directly into it. The beam just vanished, as if the darkness swallowed it. Then a sound came from the far side of the clearing, a long, dragging step, leaves cracking under something heavy, something breathing, slow and wet. Ethan grabbed my arm and pointed. His entire body shook as a shape stepped forward from the tree line. A tall figure made of shadow and bone, its limbs bent wrong, its head tilted sideways like it was studying us.
We backed away, but the creature did not rush. It simply watched us, and then lifted one long, thin arm, pointing toward the 4 copied tents, as if inviting us inside or daring us to run. No matter which we chose, we could feel that the forest had already decided. It was not finished with us yet.
Part 9. Inside the Circle of Tents. The forest pressed closer around us as we stepped toward the copied tents. Each one looked identical to the ones we had brought, but something felt profoundly wrong. The air was thick, heavy, almost solid, and every sound we made echoed unnaturally, like the woods themselves were amplifying our fear. Ethan whispered that we should just run and not touch anything, but curiosity mixed with terror kept us moving forward. Step by step, we approached the first tent, and the moment my hand touched the fabric, it felt alive, pulsating like it had a heartbeat. The zipper moved slowly under my fingers, and as I pulled it open, the darkness inside seemed to stretch beyond the limits of the tent walls like an endless void. Inside, we saw shadows moving, just faint ripples at first, then forms began to solidify. Long, thin figures crouched and writhed in the corners, their eyes glowing faintly pale and hollow. Each figure mirrored our movements, as if they had learned us from watching the real us. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, and soft whispers filled my ears, repeating every word we had ever said since entering the forest. Ethan backed away, terrified, but I couldn't stop staring, and that's when I noticed something worse. The figures inside the tents were not just imitating us, they were speaking for us, repeating the exact phrases in our voices that we had screamed, whispered, begged for mercy, all copied and distorted and layered together until it became impossible to know what was real. I turned toward the second tent, hoping it would be empty, but the same thing happened. The forms multiplied, and the voices grew louder, their hollow eyes now fixed on me, and Ethan, and Michael, and Jacob, and every movement we made was being mirrored instantly, as if the forest itself had learned us and captured every part of our existence. We tried to leave, but the path back was gone. The copied tents had formed a perfect circle, blocking all directions, and the shadows around us moved closer, like the forest was breathing, wrapping us into the center of its trap. The whispers grew into screams that were our voices, and the figures inside the tents began crawling outward through the fabric, stretching impossibly long limbs through the openings, and each shadow that touched the ground solidified into a shape as pale and wrong as the creature that had dragged our car. Michael screamed, "Grab anything!" and we shoved branches at them, but it was useless. They moved faster than we could react, and I realized then, with terror, that these were not bodies. These were extensions of the forest, each tent a womb, and every shadow inside it an incomplete version of us, being ready to replace our flesh. Jacob grabbed the camera and turned it on, desperately hoping the light would keep them away, but the beam barely penetrated the void inside the tents. Instead, the figures recoiled for a second, then surged forward faster than before, and the whispers became a chant, repeating over and over, "You belong here. You belong here. You belong here." Ethan stumbled backward into the center of the circle, and the shadows inside the tents reached for him instantly, wrapping him in pale limbs, stretching his form impossibly thin, and I realized with horror that the forest wanted to absorb him, erase him, make him part of the copied tents. We ran toward the only space left between the tents and pushed through, and the shadows screamed behind us, echoing our own voices, mocking us, taunting us, as the forest shook and the ground beneath our feet cracked
shocked and moaned, and the chanting became louder. By the time we emerged from the circle of tents, the forest had gone quiet again, but not safe quiet. It was the quiet that follows terror, the quiet that waits and watches and remembers. And we all knew that the fourth encounter had taken one of us already, and there was no telling if it would release us alive.
Part 10. Escaping the Fourth Encounter. We stumbled out of the circle of tents, gasping for air, our clothes soaked with sweat and mud, and the forest around us felt alive and waiting. Every shadow stretched longer, and every branch seemed to reach for us as if it wanted to drag us back inside. We realized immediately that whoever or whatever had copied us had not finished yet, and the forest remembered everything we had done since arriving. Ethan was pale, silent, trembling, and I could see the fear in his eyes reflecting our own. Michael grabbed our shoulders, shaking us to focus, and Jacob still held the camera, but it was useless now. Nothing could capture what was happening. Only our raw senses could tell us how close the danger was. We ran blindly through the thick undergrowth, slipping over roots and dragging ourselves through mud and shallow water. The whispers followed us, weaving through the trees, repeating our names over and over in broken voices. And every step we took, the forest seemed to stretch, twisting the paths behind us like it wanted to trap us in an endless maze. Then we saw it. The creature from the clearing, the one with the hollow eyes and crooked teeth, standing at the edge of a small ridge, watching us. The childlike figures that had once chased us now formed a line behind it, like soldiers waiting for orders. And the forest itself seemed to lean toward them, moving branches aside to create a path. Michael shouted, "Keep going!" And we ran faster, our lungs burning, our legs trembling, and the creature did not chase us immediately. It simply waited, watching the shadows of the trees stretch across the ground, and the whispers from the forest grew louder, chanting, "Your soul belongs here! Your soul belongs here!" We reached a broken path that led toward a faint glimmer of sunlight filtering through the dense canopy, and for the first time since the first night, we thought escape might be possible. But the moment we stepped onto the path, the air shifted violently, the ground trembled, and the shadows of the forest twisted into shapes familiar and horrifying at once. A figure stepped out in front of us. Not the creature, not the child figures, but something that looked like all of us combined. Our own faces, twisted and pale, hollow eyes staring straight at us, and the mouths moving in perfect unison, forming words we had screamed or whispered in terror the past 2 nights. It spoke. "We belong to the forest. You cannot leave." And the forest behind it moved, as if breathing life into the words and shapes. We ran anyway, ignoring the warning, dodging twisted roots and broken branches, crawling over fallen logs, until we saw the first glimpse of the road we had driven on the night we arrived. The sunlight hit our faces for the first time in 3 days, and it felt almost unreal. We ran faster toward the open space where the car should have been, but when we reached the clearing, it was empty, just like the first morning. Only tire marks and the soft echoes of the forest's whispers remained. We did not stop. We ran for hours until finally reaching the highway, and the moment we saw passing cars, we jumped, waving, screaming until someone stopped and offered help. Police officers took us away, asking questions, but we could not explain what had happened. The forest behind us was quiet now, but we knew the fourth encounter had marked us all somehow. Ethan refused to look at the woods again. Jacob deleted the footage. Michael never spoke of it. and I sometimes hear the whisper in my dreams, the same broken voice saying, "Help me, please, help me." Even now, I can feel the forest watching, waiting, and I know that one day it will call again, because the fourth encounter never really ends.